Hello, everyone! Welcome back to another Tuesday of Lo-Fi History. I'm Libba.
I'm Glenn.
And we're going to be taking your history questions today. Yes, bring them all. Give us your history questions. I see that Shannon's already got a topic in mind, and we always like to start out with what we're wearing, and to be honest, this is just my outfit, but I also thought it was pretty close to a lot of the outfits that I saw a lot of Rosies during World War II wearing, and that's one of the reasons I really liked it. That kind of make me feel like a little stylish history.
Like you can do it.
Yeah, like I can do it. So, but what on earth are you wearing, Glenn?
Je suis un French voyageur.
Uh...
Oui.
Some kind of French.
Yeah. So, the French voyageurs who were in what they call New France in the late 1600s all the way up to the mid-ish 1700s.
Okay.
The folks who were encouraged, forced, cajoled into going to the New World from France to basically run the French version of how to make the New World work for France, which was resource exploitation and specifically the fur trade.
Okay.
And so there were these people who would go far back into the back country to trap the furs, to hunt the furs, put them in big piles. Think about it. They're in the New World. They come from France, one of the most civilized, advanced societies of the time, and then they plop them down and they say, take a canoe into the interior, stay gone for 6 months, bring us back furs.
Oh, wow.
And
now,
so,
are these people who would have been like in the trade of fur in France as well?
Possibly. They may have just been indigenous. They may have been, fifth or sixth sons who could not find other gainful employment in France. And to be honest, a lot of them were probably just looking for adventure.
Yeah.
Right? It's not old men like I am. It's actually the younger folks who are going, because if you go and you live, you could become quite maybe not
wealthy.
Rich, but you could certainly make a better living and get more wealth than if you just stayed in France working as a common laborer or a baker or something like that.
So these were the common man from France going over to the New World.
A lot of them were, yeah. And so they, and they didn't just go by themselves. There were groups. There were private companies who sort of ran this, and they would work for the private company.
Right.
These men, of course, the voyageurs, became very hardy. They became very familiar with the Native American cultures and languages. They understood the backcountry. They were good shots. They were excellent canoemen. They were the French version of mountain men.
Now you bring up their relationship with Native American tribes. Was it any less volatile than the English relationship that happens?
Oh, yes.
And why do you think that is?
Well, this is not just me thinking. There actually is a consensus on this in history, but it's the different approaches, and this is in a nutshell, it's the different approaches between France and Great Britain as to how to make the New World a colony, right? Spain, which had discovered the New World first, went into Central and South America and began to extract wealth. And that wealth was primarily precious metals, gold and silver. And that's a whole other story.
Yeah.
The French actually get to the New World next, but not quite 100 years after the Spanish really start to so Columbus discovers the New World in 1492. Spain starts sending some significant expeditions to get the wealth out. And then the French really start going in the very early 1600s with Champlain, right?
Okay.
Who comes across? He makes like 20 voyages between the New World and France.
Wow! Throughout his lifetime.
Throughout his lifetime, and he is the explorer extraordinaire, right? He's always wanted to go into different places, into the interior. He more or less founds Quebec.
Okay.
And he becomes the governor general of New France. Well, the problem is, being governor general means that you have to govern, that you have to be the bureaucrat. He didn't like that. He kept going out in the wilderness until he finally gets a note from the king that says,
Hey, where's the governor?
yeah,
He's out in the woods again.
he'll be back in a year or two. Hold your petition until then.
Yeah.
So he keeps getting these letters from the king saying, stop. You're a great explorer. Please stop exploring. Govern the province.
Yeah.
And eventually he's recalled back to France. Anyway, so the Spanish are trying to extract mineral wealth.
Mm-hmm.
The French are they're also an extraction of wealth approach to the New World, but they're working with the native cultures. They're not trying to get land, right? They're not colonizing in a get land kind of way and putting in people and people. They're working, they're building cities, they're small cities. They're building trading posts, and even the larger cities are basically just larger trading posts to support the grander trade. And they're working with the Native Americans saying, hey, you can be a part of this exchange too. Why don't you go out and bring us beaver furs, and we'll pay you the same as we pay these other folks.
Right, yeah.
And as a result, they're not having to sign a lot of treaties with Indians to gain land. They're not having that conflict of hunting ground and who lives where. The Native Americans realize, you know what, there may be a lot of Europeans, and quite a few of them come into our territory, but they're doing the same thing we do. And as long as they, in effect, pay the fine, pay us for the rights to hunt on our land, they're not keeping the land. They're not even looking like they want to keep the land.
Okay, so
those relationships were a lot more friendly, which is, moving on in, why you get the French and Indian War.
I was going to ask, yeah, exactly. I was like, maybe they had a history already established, as far as the relationship goes, because I know that when we talk about the deerskin trade, for instance,
right,
and that's largely the British deerskin trade, I would assume.
Predominantly. The French also get some colonies down along the Gulf. I mean, New Orleans it's a French colony for most of its history.
Yeah, but with the deerskin trade, it seems like that was intentionally getting Native American tribes in debt so that eventually they could repay that debt with land. Now, is it so sinister as to think that they really knew that all along, or was there an end game there in getting land, or did it sort of end up that way?
No, that was France. Again, France and England go into the New World with very different strategies and very different sets of expectations. So, like I said, France, by the time you get to the French and Indian War, the 1750s, the French do have several tens of thousands of French people here, but the English have like 2 million,
right,
almost 2 million people here.
Yeah.
People need land to live on.
Right, okay, that makes a lot of sense.
So it began the process. So England is playing the game of trying to get land and make some money on the deerskin trade.
Okay.
The French are really just trying to make money on the deerskin trade, and they do not see New France as truly becoming a smaller mirror reflection of the mother country.
Yeah.
The way England sees the 13 colonies.
I see. Yeah. So it really is more about like what mutual benefits they can have from the Native Americans. And
right.
Not necessarily like, all right, we're gonna, like you said, make a new France. It's mostly like, hey, this is pretty lucrative for us. We want to keep this relationship going. Yeah, we start a few towns because the tradesmen got to live somewhere and live their lives, I imagine.
Yeah, exactly. and that enriches the Native Americans. Now, many Native American tribes were also empowered and enriched by trade with the British, make no mistake.
Sure.
But it's interesting, there tended to be... The British liked dealing with the native, for lack of a better phrase, the Native American imperial powers, like the Iroquois Confederacy, right? There were 5 and then later 6 central tribes to that confederacy, but they exercised control over a large geographic area and over other, let's call them client tribes.
Okay,
right?
Yeah, right.
And so if they're, like the Delaware tribe over here has this piece of land.
Right.
the Delaware are subject to the Iroquois Confederacy, but not part of it.
I see.
So
I
the
see.
Iroquois
I
will
did
go,
not realize there was that kind of structure in Native American tribes with the Iroquois.
humans are humans, man.
Yeah.
So the Iroquois are going to say to the British, we understand you would like some land here.
Mm-hmm.
If you work with us, get us some money, get us some things, get us some guns, we can move the Delaware off that land and give it to you.
I see.
Without ever actually bringing the Delaware into play. And
Right.
that's what the Iroquois do.
All right, so they take advantage of the situation as well.
Wow.
Wow.
That's what government is.
Yeah. Well, I want to give some shout outs. So, hello, Shannon. Good to see you. Hi, Robert. Good to see you as well. We got Karen in the house. We got Hat Mouse on Twitch. Fried, good evening to
Good old
you.
Fried.
And Laura, oh, this is my favorite program you do. Thank you so much, Laura.
Thanks.
This is a relatively new program on our YouTube and Facebook. We've been testing it out on Twitch. So we're multi-streaming to Twitch, YouTube, and Facebook. So getting everyone with the history.
Whether they want it or not.
That's right. And so just to finish up this topic, and then we will dive into the questions that are in the chat. And speaking of questions, Glenn is here to answer your history questions. I am DJing the music in the background, but also acting as, I'm not the historian. I am not a historian. I love working in the museum field. I learn a whole lot, but if there's something that you are also just like, what? I didn't realize that. I'm there with you. So... But, so this frock, I mean, it seems like, I noticed that Shannon said, plus that outfit is great for the cooler weather we are seeing. I imagine you've worn this outside literally on quite a few occasions, maybe like reenacting or what?
I have.
Yeah.
And I've never portrayed a French voyageur, so to be a nitpicky, detailed material culture history person, this is very thrown together, and I would not put this forward as a museum quality voyageur impression.
Sure.
Disclaimer.
Yeah.
Asterisk.
Now, the beanie is interesting. Or what see, there you go, folks. There you go. Your beanie. Now, what would a French fur trader call that?
I call it a wool knit cap.
But there you go.
When I grew up, we call it a boggin. Because I'm a hillbilly, and we can't say the word toboggan altogether.
You got your boggin?
Yep.
Yeah, Brian says his sunglasses are not historically accurate. Actually,
Well!
Now, that brings a good point. I promise we'll get to your question. But when do sunglasses become a thing? Has that been,
Well, it depends on what you are defining sunglasses as and what the purposes are. We wear sunglasses to protect our eyes from the light of the sun a lot, right? We're a very sunglass-focused society because we realize the health benefits of it.
Right.
There have been colored lenses that have been used for several hundred years, all the way back to this period, and you do see some olden time eyeglass frames with darkened lenses that may be used for what we use sunglasses for, but they were more prescribed for health if you had astigmatism or something.
Okay, right.
You could use those. There were also some prescriptions that medical knowledge being what it was at the time, some of them had, a little later on, had blue tinted lenses that were supposed to help with your syphilis.
Oh. Something tells me it wasn't ever proven to help.
It not only did it work, but people would go, hey, look, blue glasses. That guy's got syphilis.
Right. Why would you wear them? Oh, my goodness. All right. Well, let's dive into some questions because, let's see, we've got a few in the chat. And like I said, feel free to chat any history question you got on your mind. So Shannon, Glenn, can you talk about historic contested presidential races? A very timely topic. So I don't know of the historic contested presidential races in our history. What comes to mind?
Actually, history shows that there are no contested presidential elections. They're all very friendly and chummy.
Yeah.
No one really cares who's
Everything's
president.
fine. No,
So,
that's not how it goes.
The American political structure tends to be adversarial.
Right.
Most political structures are adversarial, but I would argue this sounds counterintuitive. Stay with me. The American political system is made adversarial on purpose because the idea is that our political system should be a free marketplace of ideas and beliefs, whereas other systems that existed in the past and some systems that exist today are not adversarial because they don't allow adversaries. It is simply, here are the things, you will do them because I have the power, money, weapons, what have you. So and this is the thing to remember about our system. It seems so frustrating sometimes, and it seemed frustrating since the beginning. But that's sort of the glory of it, is that it can be frustrating to us, and it can be adversarial. It can be something where we disagree vehemently, and yet the system as it is designed continues. And, you ask about contentious presidential elections. I know that there have been some very recently. I know that the 2000 election was considered by many to be incredibly controversial. And yet, I would be in very good historian company if I said that by far the most contentious election in the history of the United States is the election of 1800.
1800, all right.
1800.
Let's hear about it.
So only, what is that, 1, 2, 3, that's only the fourth election in our national history. Well, our constitutional history.
Yes.
Our constitutional history. And so we have Washington, right? The father of our country, the first president who was elected unanimously. Now, you also have to remember that the way the Constitution originally had the president being elected is that all the delegates from the Electoral College, if you were watching last time, come together and cast basically 2 votes. And the vote, and whoever gets the most votes becomes president. Whoever gets the second most votes becomes vice president.
Right. Oh, okay. That's
how it was
pretty
originally.
Yeah.
It created a lot of problems.
Well, I imagine why. I can't imagine why.
But it's again, they're working things out. It seemed like a good idea. So the first 2 terms, of course, were George Washington, and the person who got the second most amount of votes was John Adams, which should tell you that John Adams had some serious founding of our country credentials, right? He had some political capital. If he's getting second place to George Washington,
he's got to follow up George Washington's career.
So we don't appreciate John Adams today. It's another issue.
So
first 2 terms, George Washington says, I'll retire. I'm done. I'm not doing a third term, which is a very good thing.
Yeah, right.
Then John Adams gets the most votes. He is our second president of the United States. His vice president is Thomas Jefferson, who got the second most amount of votes in the Electoral College.
So this was still where that system was in place.
The system was still in place. Well, Adams and Jefferson, though having been the closest of friends and compatriots, have begun to see things very, very differently. Not only internally, but externally, with all the stuff with the French Revolution going on.
Okay.
They tend to start drifting apart politically, and not to our eyes, it's not that radical, but to them, it was incredibly important. So John Adams' term as president, he's only 1-term president. So the, 4th election we have in this country, there are basically 3 people not running, but in the running. Side note, people didn't run for president back then because it was considered untoward, ungentlemanly, and uncitizenly.
So they had to be nominated for the position?
It was their line of thinking, which, cards on the table, I very much agree with. If you want to be president so bad that you run for the office, you probably shouldn't be president. Because you want something that powerful too badly.
I see what you mean.
So even Washington was fine with being president. Adams, Jefferson, and the following, they at least had to sort of do this posture of, no, I couldn't. Well, if you call upon me to serve, I will do so. Yes. But they did not campaign.
Right. Nobody
campaigned openly.
And now I would also imagine that, is this still a time when you had to own land in order to vote at all?
Oh yeah, yes,
Okay,
there were still.
yeah.
It varied state by state, but generally speaking, there were property requirements to vote.
Okay, right. Yeah.
So the fourth of election, the election of 1800. So there are basically three people that end up on the ticket. There's John Adams, Thomas Jefferson, and Aaron Burr, who's
Okay.
supposed to be running as Thomas Jefferson's vice president.
Okay.
Well, what happens is the Electoral College goes in and creates a tie because of the weird way that things got voted, because it didn't. John Adams was out.
Yeah.
It came down to Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr, who was supposed to be his vice presidential partner. That was their plan
Wow.
within the system as it existed.
Yeah.
Aaron Burr, being an incredibly ambitious man that we really didn't need to be president. I say that now, they said that then. But they're tied to the Electoral College. Well, what does the Constitution say if there's an electoral tie? Goes to Congress.
Right. Okay.
Goes to the House of Representatives. And within the House of Representatives, they then realize that there is a struggle for the soul of America, because remember, we're very young. This
Right,
country is
yeah.
very young. The nations of Europe all have their eye on us because they don't think we're going to make it. This new crazy representative republic, it's stupid. It will fall apart. The states won't be able to get along. They're going to end up fighting each other, and it's all going to crumble. That's what Europe is thinking. And a lot of Americans are worried that it's going to not work. So they begin the voting process in the House of Representatives. And it's a tie.
Ugh.
And then
in the house too.
Even
Wow.
in the House. And then they're like, okay, well, Lloyd, let's talk to some people. We'll come back tomorrow and vote. Come back the next day. It's a tie.
What?
They vote again. It's a tie. I can't remember the exact number of ballots
Wow.
that there were, but I want to say it was pushing 30.
Wow.
It was pushing 30 times the House had to vote. And of course, this is making the news, and people are like, well, this is obviously a scam. If you don't vote for my guy, I've already written to my state. The governor is calling out the militia, and we're going to march on Washington
wow.
if you try to steal this election from our guy. And states are threatening to secede if it doesn't go a certain way. We've got to settle this. It's our first real constitutional crisis.
Yeah.
Maybe this constitution actually doesn't work. Throw it out. So it is a huge mess.
Wow.
Finally, Alexander Hamilton, of all people, goes back, because he's from New York, he goes back to the New York delegation. He's like, look, because Aaron Burr had, we think, I think this has been proved, Aaron Burr used money to buy the New York delegation's votes in the
Oh,
House
no.
of Representatives,
Oh dear.
except for Alexander Hamilton.
Yeah.
Alexander Hamilton goes back into the New York folks and says, look, I know you're bought and paid for. I am vehemently opposed to the ideas of Thomas Jefferson. And yet Jefferson at least is an honest man. Aaron Burr cannot be president of the United States because he is, I'm paraphrasing here, he's crooked, he's dishonest, he is ambitious, and he will tear this country apart if he thinks he can benefit personally from it.
Got it. Now,
And as a result, they finally go back, they vote, and then finally, Thomas Jefferson is elected president.
now, do we know? Was it still like a really, really close vote?
It was still only a couple of votes.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, I didn't know if there was like, one person who
I mean,
kind of decided. in a way.
practically it was.
Yeah.
Practically it was.
Wow.
And so that's the vote. You still have Adams in office until not January, but at this point it's March, because things move slower. They have to count the votes. The votes have to come in. Everyone has to travel by carriage and
Things are so
horseback.
much slower. We should.
3
we should be
miles an
thankful.
hour.
Yeah. Right.
Everything's 3 miles an hour. So inauguration's not until March. So Adams is just hacked off. He feels betrayed by Alexander Hamilton, who's supposed to be in his political party. He feels betrayed by his oldest well, not his oldest, one of his old and dear friends and compatriots, Thomas Jefferson, has no trust of Burr. So when it finally comes time, he, in effect, the day of the inauguration, when his old friend Thomas Jefferson is supposed to become president, he leaves on the early morning coach. Doesn't even go to the inauguration because he's upset.
Wow.
Poor John Adams.
Yeah.
Poor John Adams. So, so then, Jefferson gives his inaugural address, and it's not like it is, again, it's not like it is today. There are no microphones and amplifiers, and Mr. Jefferson is not an orator. He's a writer.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
He's a writer, not a speaker.
Yeah.
And so he basically has it. Now, he had the foresight to write it out and then have them published, and he handed it out to the
Right.
crowd. So we know what he said.
Yeah.
But he's up there and amongst all these people. He's like, we're gonna go there.
That's our president.
We are all and
Yeah.
and they're like, what? Oh, just read it. And he actually calls for unity. He says we are all Republicans. We are all Federalists. We are all working to make this nation work. So everyone come along with me. We have survived this crisis, and we will go forward and make the nation. That sort of thing. And you have to remember, we were so young. States were literally about to split off. It looked like it might come to armed conflict, and yet we had a total turnover of power from one political party to the other without a single drop of blood being spilled.
Yeah.
That in itself was a miracle within the system that we were just testing out. And as far as we know, going back to ancient times, such a thing had not occurred. A peaceful, bloodless transition of power from one group of people to the other.
Yeah.
It was incredibly contentious, but it turned out to be a huge success.
Wow.
And to this day, the transition between presidents has been, I dare say, bloodless.
Yeah.
I mean, it's been very contentious, very adversarial, but it's happened.
Yeah.
And I think that it will continue to do so.
Right. Yes.
Verbosity to and lawsuits and stuff. And look, lawsuits and recounts should happen. That's also part of the process. You have to allow those things to go forward within the framework of the system.
Right.
Within the framework of the system, things like that have to go forward because that's what makes the system legitimate.
Yeah, so it seems like we passed our first really big test.
We really, yes, we did.
Yeah,
and it was so there's your question. There are others, but the election of 1800 is the big one.
Nice. Well, thank you for your question, Shannon. We're gonna go to Karen's question. Karen says, speaking of Voyageurs, Glenn, have you seen the Barkskins TV series on National Geographic? Any comments on the history presented there? I'm not familiar with that one. Are you?
No, it's Barkskin?
Barkskins, yeah.
No, I haven't, but now I'm
Okay.
gonna have to go check it out.
Yeah.
Is it like a dramatic series or is it a documentary?
I'm curious to know what that's about. Let us know, Karen. Thank you for your question.
Geographic.
Hat Mouse on Twitch is asking regarding what we were talking about with the French fur trade. Is that why the natives they meet in Little House on the Prairie speak French?
Yes,
Yeah.
actually, turns out French is the lingua franca of the world.
Yeah.
Now, I'm using that term flippantly just to go back and make sure everyone's on the same page. French was considered for centuries to be the main language of international economic, diplomacy, of government. So even the kings of England spoke French.
Okay.
Even the kings of Prussia and Austria spoke French and read French because whenever they came together, that was going to be the language that they could use. It had sort of replaced Latin as the universal language.
All right.
And so when the French come into the New World, of course, the English focus on that eastern coast, the sea coast, because they really want to settle it. They want to build cities. They want to build trade, and they begin to make the population more dense in those areas. But they're smaller areas. The French voyageurs go everywhere, right? There are literally people coming in through Hudson Bay, walking across down, through Quebec and Montreal, going all the way down, getting on the Mississippi River, going all the way down to the Gulf Coast. They go everywhere. And these voyageurs interact with a lot of Native Americans, and the French language, therefore, becomes very common amongst the Native Americans. And even on the Lewis and Clark expedition, of course, years before Little House, they're going to be having to engage in some French talk, which creates an interesting situation because neither Lewis and Clark spoke very good French, so they hire a translator by the name of Charbonnier. They're planning, and when they negotiate, Charbonnier brings his wife with him, who you may have heard of, Sacagawea, because she is also better at languages than him. So Lewis will say, "Do you have any horses to trade?" And then Charbonnier will turn around, understand the English, and say to his wife in French, "Do you have any horses to trade?" Then she will translate from the French into an original language like Shoshone or something like that. "Do you have any horses to trade?" And then the guy will come back and say, "Well, we have 6, but they're not very good. Here's what we'll charge you for them." And then she has to turn that into French and say that to her husband.
Wow.
Then he has to turn this into English. That's how every single communication goes with a lot of these native tribes that the expedition runs into. But French is out there.
Yeah. And I apologize that I haven't been totally it seems like we got some. I think everyone can hear us, but it might be that our voices are coming out on one side. I just messed around with things.
Well, I do tend to be monotonous.
Mono, ha. So
It's a sound joke.
Let's see. I'm trying to mess around with this. Apologize. Y'all's voices are only coming from the left channel. Well, shucks. As long as y'all can hear us today, we'll try to figure that out.
It's technical stuff.
Yeah, sorry guys. And let me give out some shout outs. Fantastic Plastics on Twitch. Thank you so much for the host.
Yay!
Y'all are awesome. Fantastic Plastics are a great new wave band on Twitch. Yeah, your audio sounds like a stereo Beatles record. Well, then it's a little bit historically accurate, so great. I'll try to figure that out. Thank you, Scott, for letting us know as well. Clavion, welcome back. Good to see you as well. So, let's see. Yeah, I'll try to work on that. Let's get to our next question. Let's see. So we answered Hat Mouse's question, awesome. Okay, Robert, finally getting to your question. Now, I don't know this name. What do you think about Francis Marion, aka the Swamp Fox? I don't know who that is. Do you, Glenn?
I do.
Okay. What's up?
What do I think about him? Is that basically what the
yeah,
question?
What do you think about Francis Marion? And I have no idea who this is, so.
This has to do with the American South in the War for Independence.
All right.
For which I tend to go on for hours.
Oh,
but
well, we've only got 30 minutes. But
Let me see if I can contextualize this for our wider audience.
Yes.
There's the American Revolution. All the battles that you've heard of are in the North. All the ones that matter are in the South. After George Washington fights the British to a stalemate in the North, the British decide to come to the southern colonies and see if they can't win there. So initially they come into Savannah, they retake the colony of Georgia, get it under their power, then they go north, they retake Charleston, and attempt to bring South Carolina back into the British Empire.
I think I just fixed the problem.
Did we? I can't hear myself now.
Oh, you can't?
I can't. Does that matter? Can they hear me?
It doesn't really matter, I guess, if it's okay with you.
Then as long as they can hear my dulcet tones.
Let me know if that helped y'all. Yay! I did it!
Yay.
All right, great.
She is a genius.
Thanks. Okay, great. Thanks.
Oh yes,
Thank you.
the South. So, so they send forces in, naval and ground forces, to try to bring South Carolina in, and the plan is to just keep working their way up the coast.
Yeah.
Right, Savannah, Charleston, Wilmington, and eventually Virginia. But the problem is they can control the coast easy because they've got a gigantic navy and supply the army from those port towns. Not poor, but port towns.
Right.
But when they go into the interior of South Carolina and North Carolina and Georgia, but especially South Carolina, they start to meet resistance. And I don't want to push this analogy too far, but it is one that does tend to hold water nowadays. America into Vietnam, right? Super powerful country, very technologically and politically advanced, tries to push its power onto a small colonial power, but it has trouble doing it because the way the Vietnamese fight is guerrilla tactics.
Right.
It's sort of the same thing in the American Revolution, especially in the South.
Right.
Except Great Britain is the U.S. and the U.S. is Vietnam, right? So Francis Marion is one of those leaders of local militia, not of regular forces, but of local militia. They don't stand up and fight against British regulars. That's suicide. What they do is they disrupt supply lines. They attack forts. It's hit and run. Against a column, they'll just go shoot 2 or 3 guys and disappear into the swamps, hence the name Swamp Fox.
Oh,
and it's not just Francis Marion, it's others like Sumter and Clark and folks like that. But what happens is they also, instead of just attacking the British Army proper, they also have this, in effect, a civil war going on in South Carolina between the Patriot forces and the Loyalist forces.
Okay, makes sense.
And they also do some pretty brutal stuff and, start burning down Loyalist homes and quashing that Loyalist support in the backcountry. So eventually, Great Britain can't move forces into the backcountry without being attacked. And of course, when they attack these militiamen, they just disappear and go back home. They're not in uniform.
Right.
They don't have a fort that they need to defend. They just go home. And then the British look for them, can't find them, go back. As soon as the British leave, whoop, they all reform again.
They're like hiding in plain sight in a
mean,
way.
they are.
Yeah,
they are.
wow.
And so, and some have questioned the honorable bent of folks like Francis Marion and Sumter on the frontier fighting that way. It depends on what rules of warfare that you use. I mean, the bottom line is the Civil War in the South was not like the one in the North. It was brutal.
Mm-hmm.
It was revenge and retribution based. You had quite frankly, had a lot of Scotch Irish down there, and we don't hanker to people telling us what we can and can't do. And all those that Scotch Irish blood, the way the topography and the geography worked in the South, it was much more of a civil war than it was a proper revolutionary war like it was in the North. I mean, it seriously was. There were several battles where there wasn't a single British soldier there. It was Loyalist militia versus Patriot militia.
Now, with folks living in the South, would they have had different reasons for either choosing to remain a Loyalist or becoming or wanting independence? I mean, I'm just imagining that they might have different interests than those in the North.
Yes and no. Let's see if I can do this in a nutshell. One of the main concerns in the South, especially in the backcountry, is initially they were Loyalist. They were pro-Crown because they were not being hurt by all these tariffs and navigation acts that the people who lived along the coast were subject to.
Yeah.
They also needed Great Britain to maintain its power over and negotiating savvy with the Native Americans on the frontier. Because the folks in the backcountry are the ones who had to live close to the Indians.
Right.
They needed peaceful relations with the Indians, and Britain could provide that.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that takes the backcountry from predominantly Loyalist to predominantly pro-independence, or at least anti-British, is that the British, in a desperate attempt to try to control the backcountry and the southern colonies, send agents into Indian country to the respective tribes and say, why don't you start raiding the people who are opposed to us?
Oh, wow.
Why don't we set you loose and we will give you gifts of, typical gifts, guns and trade goods and things like that.
I had no idea. Wow.
The Indians can't always tell from looking at a settlement who's Loyalist and who's not.
Right.
So they start raiding, doing what the British have asked them to do.
Yeah.
So that's why in the Declaration of Independence, there's a clause where it goes through the list of this is why we're separating from Great Britain. And I can't remember the exact wording, but I'm paraphrasing. He's riled up the Native American savages on our frontiers and had them attack our homes, kill our family, and burn our crops.
Wow.
Which he had.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, his agents had.
Right.
So that drives them to that. And again, this Scotch-Irish, there's a lot of old feuding that goes on that the Revolution helps conveniently give an excuse for back and forth between a lot of these different factions.
So if you already had a feud with a family, you have a great excuse to put fire.
And let's say that it's as simple as a Loyalist faction rides up to you and your family, and they're like, "We need you to swear allegiance to the crown." Well, I'm loyal to the crown. Well, we need you to swear allegiance to the crown. Okay, fine. I swear allegiance to the crown. Okay, now that you're a subject sworn on paper, you have to come with us and fight in our militia. Well, I don't want to. Oh, so you're a traitor to the crown. Burn his house. Well, now you may not even believe in any of the causes that have been discussed in Philadelphia and Boston. That group of people burns your house.
Yeah.
You need to find the people that are going to go hurt them so you can sign up and go hurt them and burn their house.
Wow.
The South is a bad place to be in the American Revolution. It's incredibly fascinating. That's why it's such an interesting story. And this is just one small part of it. And I could go on.
Well, I was going to say that oftentimes during Lo-Fi history, we're just like, all right, let's do a live stream on that.
Yeah.
And yeah, just the other day we were talking about how the American Revolution during the South there's so much to talk about that we'll definitely set up a live stream as part of our schedule next year.
Yeah. So beware when you offer me, who's Francis Marion? What was that, 10, 15 minutes?
Yeah, right.
Sorry.
So, MC Walker has a question. Can you tell us about the Articles of Confederation?
Yes.
Do tell.
Okay.
Yes.
Later, not at the very beginning of the Revolution and the Independence movement, but later on, I want to say 1780, the Second Continental Congress decided that if it was going to continue the war and that if the colonies were going to work in concert, they needed some sort of confederation that they could all agree to that would provide guidance on it's not a national basis yet, on a unified basis, right? And so they agreed to the Articles of Confederation to govern the 13 colonies with, or at least give a place where they don't actually govern the 13 colonies. Let me retract that statement. For a way for the 13 colonies to act in concert in certain ways and means, especially in terms of foreign policy and a diplomatic end to the American Revolution. They're very, very state heavy, about which I mean that the states maintain most of the power. Every state only has one vote, and whether that state is Virginia with 800,000 people or Rhode Island with 80,000, they each have one vote. And most decisions, for all the states to adhere to the decisions of the Articles of Confederation, the votes have to be unanimous. So how rare is that?
Yeah, right.
And so there is no way for the central government, for the Continental Congress, they have no power to tax whatsoever. They have no power to fund continent-wide operations. The only way that it's allowed is if they ask the respective states to give them money.
Mm-hmm.
That's not a good way to raise money.
Right.
And so the Articles of Confederation are not a very good governance system. Most of the individual states like that because, again, from independence through the success in the war, all the way up to the 1780s, the states want to maintain as much control as they can. And it's only at the Constitutional Convention that people come together, I should say delegates from these states start to come together and try to create a way where there can be a national federal government that does have power. And what comes out of that convention is a balance between state power and national guidance. And it is a very, very delicate balance. And it seems like a foregone conclusion, but in those 2 to 3 months in Philadelphia, it is indescribably controversial, and there are so many arguments back and forth over exactly what those powers could be. And what comes out of it, the Constitution, provides a great deal of strength in its vagueness and openness to interpretation because it doesn't pin a lot of things down. That has been both very, very good for our country and very, very bad. But,
Now,
but the Articles of Confederation,
Yeah.
the Constitution did away with them because they couldn't accomplish anything. I take that back. Never mind. We don't have time. What were you going to ask?
well, okay, so I mean, this is sort of, I mean, would you consider the Articles of Confederation like kind of first draft constitution, like getting the thoughts together, getting some kind of consensus for the future of the United States?
Well,
or is it just like, all right, we need something in the meantime?
I think in retrospect, it can be seen that way.
Mhm.
That's a fair point. But at the time, when so many of those states agreed to the Articles of Confederation, unanimously, of course, because that's the only way to do it, they didn't see it going any further. It wasn't a first draft. It was the final draft. It's what you turned in, right? And so, like I said, many states were happy with it, and it worked until it didn't. And by the 1780s, it didn't work because every state controlled how it traded with England. There was no tariffs. There was no regulation of trade between the individual states, much less. So Virginia could trade with England in any way that it wanted for any prices and block all the other states out of trade if it wanted to. There was no, the only thing that the Articles of Confederation really provided for, that the Congress did, was the disposition of the western lands that were granted to the United States with the Treaty of 1783 from Great Britain. Namely, everything between the set boundaries of the colonies and the Mississippi River was general purpose land of the United States.
Yeah.
And when I say United States, I mean lowercase u, capital S at this point.
Right. Yeah. And so it sounds like the states were kind of not technically their own countries, obviously, but functioning.
They believe that was the idea. They were sovereign states.
Yeah.
They were. It was the country of Virginia, the country of Massachusetts.
Oh, so it literally was. Oh, I didn't realize that.
There was not only was there no universal taxation, there was no universal currency.
Oh,
nothing. I mean, that's what I'm saying. It was incredibly complicated. So they did consider. That's what a confederation is. It's a loose union of separate sovereign states.
Makes sense. Yep. So, Clavion says, "You know so much, I can't imagine holding all that in my head." And,
well, the key is to start being a nerd when you're about 6 years old, and it's downhill from there.
But just to let everyone know, I mean, you are a professor of history, so you've talked about this a whole lot over the years.
I've talked about it a lot, and I have read a lot about certain subjects. I sound knowledgeable because the questions are turning out to be things that I know something about.
Yeah.
You know, if you start asking about the history of colonialism in South America and how that relates to the Caribbean nation state development in the 1960s to 70s, I'm just going to stare at the camera.
Me
like
too.
This.
Scott says, but yet he can't tie his shoes. Is that true? Scott. Oh, look at him. But I mean, just so our audience gets to know your knowledge base a little better, I mean, I imagine you read a whole lot as a kid and such, but I mean, is it really a combination of you've learned from books, you've learned from study, but you've also done living history interpretation for so long that there's so much research that goes into that, because especially us here, I mean, when we get questions either from kids or adults, it brings up something we may have not studied before, and then you learn from it.
Right, you have to teach yourself and learn from it. And, you know, I think this is true in people who have history as a hobby, just like everyone has a hobby or an interest. I think we all go through phases where we have this umbrella of things we like. But under that umbrella, here's this little detail that suddenly we're really interested in this facet of it. So we're gonna read and research as much as we can on this subject for a year.
Yeah.
Right? And then you absorb a lot of that, and then you don't get bored with it, but you've kind of exhausted your interest, let's say. And then this little other nodule pops up. of something else that may be totally different than this. You're like, oh, I want to know more about that.
Yeah.
And so for the next year and a half, you read books, you watch documentaries, you read the Wikipedias and things like that, right? And so it's eventually, as you get older, kids, you have a lot more of those 6 month to 1 year focus study times under your belt. That's what it comes down to.
Now, when you say that you've gotten some interests that have been really specific, is there one that comes to mind that you just did like a wormhole, a deep dive, and like something super, super specific?
So the Norman Conquest, 1066 and stuff like that, that is an ongoing wormhole of wormholes.
Which we have a live stream on if you check out our YouTube.
You could probably judge me by if you went into the basement and looked at my study, and you would see how much linear feet per unit shelf are dedicated to certain topics. And you're going to know how deep some of those some of those wormholes are not that deep. There's only this many books. And then there's a couple of probably 2.5 entire bookshelves dedicated to, for example, the American Revolution and the periods just before and after that. So,
funny, Zarista says, for me, I fall down the serial killer stories wormhole.
But you know exactly what I'm talking about, right?
You get that like fascination.
You start reading and researching, and again, I love watching documentaries too. And I think one of the reasons I love doing Living History so much is because, well, maybe not, we're all not still kids at heart, but I certainly am, and I love playing dress up.
Oh yeah.
And I love the stuff. I love the material culture of it all. And how the clothing works and how the tools work. And we've discussed this before too. Lots of people get into reenactment via military reenactment. They want to be Civil War reenactors, Revolutionary War reenactors, because boys like sticks that go bang, right? We want to play soldier. And yet, as I've gotten older, the military stuff's still there, but I've started to branch out into like, well, everyone's a Civil War soldier. What if I was a Civil War doctor? Or instead of an American Revolution War soldier, what if I was just a laborer? Instead of being a knight in the medieval period, what if I was just a monk? Or even just a peasant with some basic tools? And when you're focused on interpreting history to the public, every one of those little wormholes provides you with a different experience and perspective to share with the public.
Right.
And it can also be more expensive.
Yeah, I bet. Clavion also says, my latest research obsession was animatronic bands from the 80s. That sounds fascinating. I mean, when you say animatronic band, the only thing I can think of is like the Chuck E. Cheese band.
I'm sure that's a big part of it.
And I guess the Star Wars one wasn't animatronic. I'm showing how much of a terrible Star Wars fan I am, but I'm not. But when they go into the bar, there's like, isn't there a band playing in Star Wars or something? But I don't
Figure and Dan and the modal nodes.
Yeah.
As everyone knows.
Clavion says, yeah, exactly. Oh, hey, Zarista. So good to see you. That's why I love the James Townsend Revolutionary Era cooking show. Oh, yes. We've used that as a resource before. Yeah, they're great.
Their whole channel is great, and that guy just seems so friendly.
Yes, shout out to Townsend. You should definitely check them out on YouTube.
Someday I'll get to meet that nice guy.
That'd be so cool.
It would be cool.
That'd be awesome. Robert says he's gone down the Civil War wormhole, which I'm sure is just endless as well, because there's probably more, there's more documentation, especially compared to some of the older subjects.
And this was a decade ago, it may still hold up, but the Civil War is such a popular subject in just general popular history that the estimate was that there has been an average of 1 book per day released on the Civil War since the Civil War ended.
Wow. It doesn't surprise me, but it's also like, that's nuts. Well, y'all, we are reaching the end of our hour, and it looks like we don't have any more questions. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, and before you leave, we do have a request. We have been nominated as the best of Hall Counties in the museum category for the best of Hall County. So in all the chats, I got to go to all 3 chats. I'm going to put a link where you can vote for us. Anyone can vote for us, and you get 1 vote per day, and we would so appreciate your support. We were honored to be nominated. So I've got that in our YouTube and going to Facebook now.
Yeah, I'm not sure if voting once per
we
day
go.
is a true democracy, but we'll take it.
Yeah, right. Yeah, whatever. It's the rules. So thank you all for joining us. And we've got a live stream program tomorrow. It is a rerun of our Queen Victoria live stream hosted by Marie Walker, Director of Education, and Glenn as well. So that's going to be super fun. Join us tomorrow at 2 p.m. Eastern to learn all about Queen Victoria, because she had such an influence on culture and history.
And was that Marie's first live stream with us?
You know, I think Marie's very first one may have been as a Civil War nurse, which you did a great
true.
job.
Yes.
So we have over 60 live streams now. So check us out on YouTube as well to enjoy all of those. And on Friday, we have a special members live stream that I'm particularly excited about when it comes to writing in the 18th and 19th century. So Glenn, do you want to give a little preview of that?
Yeah, just a small thing. This is how people communicated, right? There was no email, there were no phones. If you wanted to communicate with someone outside of a 30-minute ride, you would write them a letter. Writing a letter was a very personal, very deliberate, very intimate thing in this time period. And we're going to explore not only, how important that was within these respective societies and time periods, but we're going to look at how you actually wrote a letter, how you might word it, how to sharpen a quill, the different kind of
That's
ink,
so cool.
what kind of paper you would use, how you would mail it, what that process was, the entire shebang. So
Yeah.
that's Friday if you're a member. And if you're not a member, you certainly should be, because that is how we keep the History Center going. It's folks like you making all these programs accessible to everyone. So if you're not a member, please consider doing so. There's information on our website. If you are already a member, thank you so much. You make a difference here at the History Center.
Absolutely. And I've got the link to become a member. It's as little as $3 a month or $35 a year. You can give whatever donation you would like, as long as it's at least that $3 a month and $35 a year. If you are facing any kind of financial challenges, though, please do email us. Just go to our website, let us know, and we're happy to give you a free digital membership. Just let us know that you're facing that, and that's totally fine.
And I wouldn't be a very good museum director if I didn't point out that we have membership levels up to $5,000 if you're interested. Call me if you're interested.
Yeah. Well, guys, thanks so much. We'll be back next Tuesday for more Lo-Fi history. So all of my Twitch friends, all the people in the Twitch channel, we're going to raid a channel. If y'all aren't familiar with what that means, that is basically taking your viewers to another channel that we'd like to support. We're going to go to the Tangerine Club today. And they're a really great Brazilian band that plays on Twitch. And folks, if you're not familiar with Twitch, it's largely a video game streaming platform, but there's a really great and growing music and performing arts category. There is crafting, there's education as a category, and I always like to say this, I think we're the only museum on Twitch, so it makes us proud.
Yes.
But until we see you next week, please take care, and we hope to see you in the chat again soon. So, all my Twitch friends, get ready to raid the Tangerine Club, and until we see you again, take care.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.